If you're familiar with the Backrooms, you already know exactly what we're talking about. Yellow-tinted hallways stretching endlessly in every direction, with no windows, no exits, and no landmarks that tell you where you are or how you got there. The damp carpet beneath your feet, the fluorescent lights flickering softly overhead, the constant electrical hum of something whose source you cannot identify, and the feeling that you're not alone, that there's something in the corridors you cannot see, something that may be getting closer, or may already be very close. For those who have never heard of the Backrooms, they are an internet-born cultural phenomenon, a collection of images and stories describing an impossible place where people end up after accidentally slipping out of ordinary reality, an endless labyrinth without a map, an environment that never offers safety, where every hallway looks exactly like the one before it, where finding the exit feels impossible, not because you stop trying, but because the space itself seems designed so that the exit can never be found. This cultural phenomenon would not be nearly as powerful if it didn't resonate with something deeply real. And what it resonates with is an experience that millions of people carry inside themselves without ever stepping into any imaginary corridor. The experience of living inside a nervous system that cannot confirm that the environment is safe, a nervous system that monitors continuously, that scans every situation for exits, threats, and signs that something is wrong, that moves through corridor after corridor of its own internal landscape, and never finds the final signal that says it can stop. Welcome to the backrooms of the nervous system. In neuroscience, the behavior of continuously scanning the environment for signs of danger has a technical name: environmental hyperscanning. Unlike the normal orienting response, which briefly activates when something new appears and then shuts down, hyperscanning is a persistent scanning state that does not require a concrete stimulus to remain active. The system is always analyzing, always evaluating, always processing the environment in search of something it cannot quite define. Like someone walking through an unfamiliar hallway, not because there is visible danger, but because the absence of confirmation of safety is enough to keep the system moving. Think about how this shows up in everyday life. You walk into a meeting, and before a single word is spoken, your system has already evaluated the expression on every face in the room. You receive a message from a colleague that simply says, "Can we talk?" And your system immediately begins constructing scenarios about what it might mean. You're in a social setting, and one part of you is engaged in the conversation, while another part is systematically mapping exits, monitoring facial expressions, evaluating tones of voice, and searching for signs that something is about to change. This is not paranoia. It is not pathological anxiety in the clinical sense. It is hyperscanning, a system that has learned that continuously scanning the environment is what allows threats to be detected before they fully emerge. The difference between someone who does this occasionally and someone who does it chronically lies in the activation threshold. For a system living in a state of chronic vigilance, hyperscanning does not require a trigger. It is the default state. The baseline condition, the hallway the system is always walking through. There is one characteristic of hyperscanning that makes it especially exhausting. Unlike a concrete problem that can eventually be solved, hyperscanning is searching for something it can never truly find. Absolute confirmation of safety, and absolute safety, in the sense of an unshakable certainty that nothing bad can happen, does not exist in the real world. The real world is ambiguous. People have neutral expressions that could mean almost anything. Situations allow for multiple interpretations. The future is genuinely uncertain, and so the hyperscanning system is condemned to wander hallways that never end. Not because it isn't trying, but because what it is looking for simply does not exist in the environment. It's like searching for the exit of a maze using a map that was designed for a completely different maze. The map may be accurate in itself, but it does not match the territory you're actually standing in. And here is something that completely changes the way this experience is understood. The system is not broken. It is using a survival strategy that worked in an earlier environment. An environment where constant scanning made sense, where threat was real and frequent enough to justify continuous monitoring. The problem is not the strategy. The problem is that the system never received the signal that the maze changed, that the map needs to be updated, that the hallways it is moving through now are different from the hallways it learned to fear. And until that signal arrives in a way the system can actually recognize, it keeps moving, hallway after hallway, without finding the exit. One of the most precise concepts for understanding what happens inside a nervous system in a state of chronic scanning comes from the psychology of perception. It is called threat-induced perceptual narrowing. When the threat detection system is activated, attention literally narrows, not as a metaphor, as a measurable neurological process. The brain regions responsible for peripheral visual processing reduce their activity. Focused attention, the kind that processes what is directly at the center of the visual and cognitive field, intensifies. The system enters tracking mode, searching for the exact point from which the threat will emerge. In situations of genuine danger, this is extraordinarily useful. When there is a predator in the forest, narrowing attention toward the direction of a sound means that all perceptual resources are available to process the information most relevant to survival. But in situations of ambiguous or anticipated threat, where there is no concrete source of danger, only the diffuse perception that something may be wrong, perceptual narrowing creates a paradoxical effect. The more the system narrows its attention in search of threat, the less able it becomes to process the information that could confirm safety. Signals of safety, relaxed facial expressions, neutral environments, the absence of indicators of risk, are often located at the periphery of attention, exactly where perceptual narrowing reduces sensitivity. The system searching for confirmation of safety is, through the very mechanism of that search, becoming less capable of perceiving the signals that would confirm it. This is the Backrooms hallway expressed in neurological terms. The faster you run in search of the exit, the more the hallways seem to multiply. The more the system scans for confirmation, the less capable it becomes of receiving it. There is a second mechanism that deepens this pattern in an even more specific way. Predictive threat mapping. The brain does not process the environment reactively. It does not wait to receive information and then decide what to think. It operates predictively. It constructs anticipatory models of what it expects to encounter. And it uses incoming sensory information primarily to adjust those models. In a system with a history of frequent threat, predictive models become calibrated to include potential danger in almost any context. The hallway ahead is not simply unknown. It is potentially dangerous. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is the silence before something happens. A new situation is not simply new. It is new, unpredictable, and therefore potentially risky. The system's predictive model transforms ambiguity into presumed threat. And once presumed threat is built into the model, the system begins searching for evidence that confirms it. This phenomenon has a name in cognitive psychology: threat confirmation bias. The system is not evaluating the environment neutrally. It is evaluating with the threat hypothesis already in place, and it tends to find what it is looking for. A neutral facial expression is interpreted as potentially hostile. A delayed text response is interpreted as a sign that something has changed. A moment of silence in a conversation carries the weight of something left unsaid, not because these things are threatening in themselves, but because the predictive model has already categorized them as potentially threatening before any conscious evaluation takes place. Researcher Christine Porath of Georgetown University documented how people in states of chronic hypervigilance consistently perceive more signs of rejection and hostility in ambiguous interactions than people with well-regulated nervous systems. Not necessarily because they are wrong, but because the filter through which they process reality has been calibrated by experiences that made attention to threat the dominant processing strategy. The map was designed for a particular maze, and even in different mazes, the system continues using the same map. There is a third concept that deepens our understanding of this pattern: orienting response fatigue. The orienting response is the automatic reflex that directs attention toward new or unexpected stimuli. Under normal circumstances, it activates briefly, evaluates the stimulus, determines that there is no threat, and then deactivates. The entire process takes only seconds. In a system with chronic hyperscanning, the orienting response does not fully deactivate after each evaluation. It remains partially active, in a state of elevated readiness, prepared to fire again at the slightest stimulus. The result is a system that exists in a continuous state of near activation of the orienting response. a kind of constant alertness that has not become a full alarm, yet never returned to baseline. Over time, this intermediate state consumes cognitive resources out of proportion to its apparent intensity. It is the equivalent of keeping a car idling in traffic. The engine is not operating at full capacity, but fuel is being consumed continuously. And when the light turns green and acceleration is required, there is less reserve available than the fuel gauge would suggest. If this video is reaching you in a way that feels familiar, if you can recognize your own system in these words, there is more here on this channel. Each video builds upon the one before it. Subscribe so the next one is already waiting for you. But there is something even more specific about how a nervous system in a state of chronic scanning constructs its experience of the world. Something that involves not only how it perceives the environment, but how it literally builds it. How it maps the surrounding world in terms of safety and danger, and why certain places, certain situations, and certain people become zones of automatic activation, not because of what they are, but because of what the system has learned to anticipate within them. The nervous system does not experience space the way an architect or a geographer does. It classifies it, continuously, automatically. Every environment you move through is subjected to an implicit evaluation that the system files away in terms of threat probability. Affective neuroscience researcher Naomi Eisenberger of UCLA has documented how the brain uses overlapping circuits to process physical pain and social pain, and how both activate the same threat assessment system. This means that the maze your system is mapping is not only physical, it includes social situations, performance-related contexts, relationships with authority figures, conversations that carry the possibility of rejection or disapproval, environments where mistakes have visible consequences. All of these contexts pass through the same threat mapping process the system would use to evaluate unfamiliar physical territory. In cognitive neuroscience, this tendency to organize the environment in terms of safety and danger is called affective mapping of space. The brain does not simply perceive where objects and people are, it perceives where danger is, where the exits are, where threat is likely to come from. And in a system with a history of frequent threat, this map becomes increasingly detailed, more nuanced, more refined. Every corridor of the maze receives a risk classification based not on what is happening now, but on what happened before in similar corridors. The office where a difficult conversation took place 6 months ago still carries an activation marker. The type of message that once preceded bad news activates the system when it appears again, even if the content is completely different. A situation that shares superficial characteristics with another that was threatening triggers activation that seems disproportionate to the present stimulus, because the present stimulus is not being evaluated in isolation. It is being evaluated in relation to the map the system has built over time, in relation to every corridor it has ever walked through, to every moment when something that seemed safe turned out to be dangerous, to every context where lowering its guard had consequences. This process of predictive mapping based on past experience has a specific name in the psychology of associative learning, second-order contextual conditioning. The system does not simply learn to fear specific stimuli that were associated with threat. It learns to fear contexts that share characteristics with contexts where threat existed, and over time, the network of contexts that activate the system expands. The corridors of the maze multiply, not because the world has become more dangerous, because the map has become more detailed, more comprehensive, more sensitive to similarities that the system has learned to treat as signs of risk. There is a dimension of this pattern that is rarely named, yet it is central to understanding the experience of living with a chronically scanning nervous system. It is the cognitive cost of maintaining the map. Maintaining a detailed, effective map of the environment, with its risk zones, its mapped triggers, its identified escape routes, requires continuous cognitive resources. Attention that could otherwise be fully present in the moment. Working memory that could be available for creative processing or problem solving. Processing capacity that could be integrated into the experience of what is happening right now. A system that is continuously updating its threat map is simultaneously redirecting resources that should be available for other functions, and the result is that familiar feeling of being physically present in one place while mentally somewhere else, of hearing a conversation but not being fully in it, of being in a pleasant experience yet feeling that part of you is still walking another corridor. It is not distraction. It is the system running its mapping function in parallel with everything else you are doing. There is another aspect of this pattern that completely changes the understanding of why the exit seems so difficult to find. A mechanism called the checking loop without resolution. When the system has mapped a potential threat within a particular context, it naturally seeks resolution. It looks for information that will confirm or dismiss the identified risk. In situations involving concrete threats, that resolution is available. The threat materializes and is responded to, or the threat does not materialize, and the system receives confirmation that it was a false alarm. In situations of ambiguous threat, where risk is possible but never confirmed or dismissed, the checking loop finds no resolution. The system searches for the information that would close the cycle. It does not find it. Returns to the starting point. Searches again. It is the corridor that never ends. Not because the system is malfunctioning, but because it is trying to solve an equation for which the necessary information is not available. The potential threat remains potential. It never becomes real enough to be addressed. It never becomes unlikely enough to be dismissed, and the system keeps walking. This unresolved checking loop explains why thoughts about certain situations return repeatedly even after you have decided to stop thinking about them. The conscious decision has no access to the mechanism running the loop. The loop is not in conscious thought, it is in the threat assessment system, a system that is doing its job. A system that needs something different from a decision in order to bring the cycle to an end. The image of the backrooms resonates so deeply because it captures something that clinical descriptions often miss. The feeling that there is nothing wrong you can point to. The hallway is intact. Nothing is breaking. There is no visible threat. And yet something feels fundamentally wrong. The quality of the space itself. The absence of confirmation that it is safe to be there. The constant hum of something that has no name, yet the system detects it and cannot ignore it. In neurological terms, this experience has a precise description. It is called a state of sustained diffuse threat. Unlike fear, which has an object, a direction, an identifiable source, diffuse threat is a state of activation without an anchor. The system knows that something may be wrong, but it does not know what. And not knowing what is often more exhausting than knowing. Because not knowing keeps the system in active search mode, looking for what it cannot name, scanning hallways for something that has no defined shape. Research conducted by Sonia Bishop and colleagues at the University of California, Berkeley mapped the neural differences between processing concrete fear and diffuse threat. Concrete fear activates specific regions of the amygdala associated with direct action responses, fight or flight. Diffuse threat activates broader circuits, including the medial prefrontal cortex and the insula, regions associated with the ongoing evaluation of uncertainty and the monitoring of internal states. Translated into subjective experience, concrete fear mobilizes action, diffuse threat mobilizes vigilance, and vigilance without an object becomes exhaustion without resolution. The hallway that has no exit, because the exit is not in any of the hallways the system is searching. It exists on an entirely different level. It exists in updating the map, in recognizing that the maze the system is navigating was built for a context different from the one it currently inhabits. Researchers such as Lisa Feldman Barrett of Northeastern University argue that the brain does not simply perceive the world, it actively constructs it using predictions based on previous experiences. What we call perception is, to a large extent, the model the system has built being confronted with sensory data. And when that model includes diffuse threat as the default state, when the maze has been learned as the kind of place where something is always lurking, the system produces that experience even when the external environment does not justify it. The backroom's hallway is not out there. It exists within the model the system uses to construct the experience of being anywhere. And models, unlike facts, can be updated, not through decision, not through argument, but through something that learning neuroscience calls predictive expectation violation. When the system repeatedly encounters contexts it expected to be threatening, and they are not. When it walks down the hallway and the predicted threat never appears, the predictive model begins to update. Gradually, with every experience that contradicts the expectation of threat, With every context, the system evaluated as risky that turned out to be neutral or safe. With every moment, the checking loop searched for resolution and found not the anticipated threat, but its absence. Each of those experiences becomes a small update to the map, a small change in the affective cartography, a slight reduction in the activation threshold of environmental hyperscanning, a modification in the predictive model the system uses to construct the experience of the hallways it travels through. This process is not fast, it is not linear, it does not happen through willpower, but it does happen, with the same precision with which the original map was built, through repetition, through accumulated experience, through patterns that, given enough time, overwrite the old ones. Now, connecting everything explored in this video, environmental hyperscanning is the state of continuously scanning the environment for signs of threat that does not require a concrete stimulus to remain active. It is the system walking hallways not because danger is visible, but because the absence of confirmation of safety is enough to keep it moving. Threat-induced perceptual narrowing reveals the central paradox. The system searching for confirmation of safety becomes, through the very mechanism of searching, less capable of perceiving it, because signals of safety exist precisely in the attentional periphery that scanning narrows. Predictive threat mapping shows that the brain does not evaluate the environment neutrally. It arrives with a model already built from past experience, one that classifies ambiguity as presumed risk before any conscious evaluation occurs. Orienting response fatigue describes the state of permanent quasi-activation that consumes cognitive resources disproportionately, the engine idling endlessly, never truly resting and never fully accelerating. Affective cartography of space reveals how the system builds detailed risk maps over time, assigning threat markers to entire contexts based on historical associations, creating an internal maze that progressively expands. Second-order contextual conditioning explains why stimuli that are only superficially similar to past threat contexts activate the system in the present, not because of what they are, but because of which hallway they occupy on the map. The unresolved checking loop describes the mechanism that keeps the system moving without finding an exit. The search for resolution to a threat that is never confirmed and never dismissed, creating the neurological equivalent of wandering infinite hallways. And the state of sustained, diffuse threat names the specific quality of the experience. Not fear with an object, not acute alarm, but the constant hum of something the system detects and cannot ignore, yet cannot define clearly enough to either respond to or dismiss. The exit from the nervous system's backrooms is not located in any of the hallways the system is currently walking. It exists in updating the map that determines how all of those hallways are constructed. And maps can be updated with time, with experiences that violate the threat expectations that were learned, with contexts that repeatedly reveal themselves to be safer than the model predicted. If something in this video reached you differently, if you recognized your own system within this maze, share it in the comments. One word. What stayed with you? What changed after naming the pattern? Because naming the maze is already different from wandering through it without knowing it is a maze. And there is one dimension of this pattern that this video has not yet explored. What happens when a chronically scanning system encounters a specific stimulus that perfectly matches one of its learned threat categories? Why certain notifications, certain sounds, certain messages trigger a response that feels completely disproportionate to what they are? And what that reveals about how the digital world has become a unique maze for a nervous system calibrated to detect threats in every signal coming from its environment.